Traverse PC's CAD Workflows today. We'll be taking a look at a project we did here. This is a Fred Meyer's store. They're at one of the Kroger chain grocery and, well, lots of stuff stores. We'll be starting by taking a look at a couple of simplified workflows, Traverse PC to CAD, CAD to Traverse PC, and then we'll take a look at the overall workflow. Then we'll dig into the specifics. We'll look at the different tools that can help you work with CAD files and make sure that you get what you need and you're able to provide what you need to provide. So then we'll take a look at exporting points for Stakeout or other needs, and then we'll do questions and answers and take a look at resources. So let's take a look at the workflows. Now this is a very simplified workflow. We start with you get the project and you do your research, you find the record data, you do your field work, you put together your data, boundary, any easements, topography, whatever you need to provide. And you try to make sure that it is set on the same grid or CRS or projection with the same units that the engineer or architect are going to use. Now, in Traverse PC, we talk about both grid and coordinate reference systems. GIS folks talk about projections. Those are all the same thing. They're really just different names for the same thing. And we'll be looking at the units a little bit more because architects tend to work in inches rather than in feet like we do. So, and then we'll send the file out to the architect or engineer working in traditional CAD. We'll send them most likely a DWG, but possibly other file types as well, depending on their needs. So that's the simplified Traverse PC to CAD workflow. Let's take a look going the other direction. So the architect or engineer, he's taken your data and he's done his thing, done whatever he needed to do. Keep in mind that he may change your grid, CRS, projection, units, coordinates, who knows? I mean, we've seen a lot of different things happen on that end. He's going to send you the file from a traditional CAD program, and then we're going to be taking a look at 3 different ways that you will be able to interact with what he has sent you, and then be able to get out in the field, stake out the project, and go from there. Now, the overall workflow with a large project, there could be several iterations. You could go round and round on this. I know we did on our Fred Meyer project. You know, there were volume calculations and excavations and all of this stuff. So it was a complex project. So, you know, we did our work in a TRV file, sent out a DWG to the engineers. They in turn did their stuff, sent it back to us. We worked with their data, and etc. So you can see that the overall workflow can be quite complex. That's why we took a look at the simplified workflow initially. So let's get into some details then. We're going to take a look real quick. This is not anything really to do with the XReference, but we're going to go ahead and export a file. Take a quick look at that before we dig into the rest of the XReference and the other CAD tools. So here we've got our file in Traverse PC. We've got some topo in it, property boundary, all of that. We need to get this out to the engineers. So the way that works, we go to the Tools menu in the Drawing view. We choose Export Drawing As. It gives us a chance to save our file. And then we choose the file type that we want to export. So this is going to depend on what program they're running. In our case, we're going to send them an AutoCAD DWG. Now I want to point this out. This gear icon button, whenever you see this in Traverse PC, this is settings for whatever it's next to. So right at this moment, this is the settings for AutoCAD DWG. I'm going to click on this and point out just a couple of things here. First of all, the version. My recommendation to you is leave this version set fairly low, like it is here, either 2004 or something like that, for all of your exports, unless they have specified a specific version file that they need. The reason I recommend leaving it low like this is because a lot of people have not been able to afford to update their AutoCAD because it's so expensive. So they're running older versions of AutoCAD. If you keep your version low like this, you'll be able to send out your file, and even people with the newest version of AutoCAD will be able to bring it in and work with it. So keep it low unless they've specified a specific version. The next thing I want to point out here is 3D lines. Depending on your project, I recommend you leave this turned off. Traverse PC is always 3D. We're always working with elevations, even if you ignore it. You may have everything set at 0 elevation, but Traverse PC is tracking elevations. The problem comes in if you've got elevations on this file and you're sending it to someone who is not expecting a 3D file, they can run into problems with slope distance versus horizontal distance. Traverse PC knows the difference and deals with it. We don't care. But in CAD, they can have problems with it. So unless you're sending to someone who is expecting a 3D file, do not have this turned on. In this case, we're going to be exporting a surface, so we do want 3D lines. Another option I'm going to point out is down here in the lower right, preview after export. Whenever you send any kind of file to anyone, whether it's a PDF or a DWG, or it doesn't matter, please preview it before you send it to them. Make sure that you are seeing what they're going to see. Make sure you've given them what they're going to expect. All right, now I don't have this turned on in this case because what this does is after I export the file, if this is turned on, it will launch the DWG file in whatever program is associated with DWGs in my Windows. In my case, that's DWG TrueView, and it's a slow loading program. So I've got this turned off. I've got it set aside, so we'll be able to just pop that up and not waste any time. But I do recommend that you have this turned on or use some method to preview your file after you create it. So the way this works, once we set our file name, and you can browse and put it wherever you want, we've automatically assigned a file name to it that's based on the TRV file name and the drawing name, but you can edit that. We go ahead and export it, and I will overwrite that file, and so it's finished. Now, if that preview were turned on, it would currently be starting up my DWG TrueView. I've already got it open so we can see what this file looks like in CAD. So here's the file in CAD, and if we take a look at this, I'm going to zoom in a bit, and so we can do all of this nifty stuff here that, you know, spin it around, see that it is actually a 3D file. Okay, now one thing that you may or may not be aware of, this is our surface, our contour lines, but also within this file we always include the underlying tin. Now in the case of an AutoCAD file, that's a polyface mesh, so it's in its own layer, and the engineers on the other end, they will have the underlying tin or polyface mesh that they will need to be able to work with your surface. So that's included in these files automatically. It's automatically turned off. They can turn it on as needed. So that's the simplified workflow, getting it out to them. You can see there's not a lot that you need to do. You're just going to do your normal stuff and send them a file. Okay, so we're going to take a look now at XReferences. This is the newest way we have of working with CAD files. We're going to take a look at inserting an XReference, the advantages and disadvantages, we're going to take a look at referencing that data to our survey if there are differences in what they've sent us, whether it's their coordinate reference system or their units or whatever. We're going to look at the various options for working with XReferences. Okay, so let's take a look here at an XRef. Let's see how that works. I'll go to Insert, XReference, and then I can, so I'm going to grab this file and bring in that XReference. Now you can see that we do have a problem. This is not matching up to our data. So I brought in that XReference. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of working with an XReference, first of all. So one of the advantages is that we have not actually brought in all of these individual pieces. We're simply referencing this. We're telling Traverse PC to visually display this XReference that contains 3,000 plus objects. Okay, so we don't have to slow down your computer with calculating all of these objects as we do with objects in Traverse PC. So that's one of the advantages here. Another major advantage is that this file is live. So if someone updates this file, we can see those changes within our drawing. Okay, so let's see how that looks. If I go and open this same file in our CAD view, here it is now. So if I do something to it, like draw a circle on it, and then save the file, when I come back to the drawing and regenerate it, that circle appears in our drawing here. So this is one of the major advantages, is that this file is live because it's referenced, as opposed to importing or using one of the other methods. All right, so that's one of the major advantages. Let's go back and get rid of this circle because I really don't want it in this file. Save it, come back and regenerate our drawing, and the circle's gone. So there are major advantages to working with an XReference. There are also a couple of disadvantages. Let's get the CAD view out of the way so that it's not a distraction right now. There are a couple of disadvantages, and they are that these are not actual drawing objects. So you don't have all of the flexibility of working with them as you would with other objects in your drawing. Okay, so that's probably the major disadvantage of this. At this point, let's take a look and see what we can do with this. Okay, so first of all, I need to match this data that came back to us up to our data. So keep in mind, this could be any number of things. Maybe they moved the coordinates. How many times have we all seen that? Or it came from an architect and it's in inches instead of feet. So we got to fix all of this. This same method that I'm about to show you applies to all of those situations. It also applies to the rest of the tools that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to use this same method with all three different methods that we'll be looking at here today. So we want to match this up. So what I do is I hover over the XReference, right-click it, and I have an option in XReferences to reference the XReference to the survey data. Now I want you to pay attention to the status bar down here, where whenever you're in a tool in Traverse PC, the status bar tells you what Traverse PC is expecting from you. So right now it's telling us to select the first survey point, and we have some options here. I can hit I on the keyboard to do an insert snap, E for an end snap, M for a mid snap, T for an intersect snap. So I can use any of these to select that first survey point. Now, in looking at what we've got here, it looks like our southwest corner of the property is already pretty well matched up. So it kind of looks like we've just got a difference here of true bearing versus grid bearing, or just a different basis of bearing, but that our coordinate systems are matched up. That's how it looks. Let's take a look at this. So I'm gonna start at this southwest corner. So we'll zoom in on the southwest corner here. All right, yeah, and it looks like, see, this blue line, that's their property line. This green one is ours. All right, so we want to select our first survey point. So I'm going to press and release the E key on the keyboard to do a snap end. And then I'm going to get on this line. I'm closer to the west end than the east end. Notice I'm not really that close to where I want to end up. The reason for that is I want to make sure that my snap works. How many times have you seen a file from one of these guys using traditional CAD where they missed the snap and didn't realize it because they clicked really close to where they wanted to end up? If you use your snaps and click away from where you want to end up, you can see it happen. So I've already told it that I want to do a snap end. So now the status bar is telling me left click end. So I just get on this line, left click, and watch where the cursor ends up. It jumped right to that corner. So I know I got my snap. All right. Now, notice over here, we've started building a report on what we're doing down here at the bottom. And I apologize, I didn't clean this view out first, so there's some other stuff in here that doesn't apply. Just this stuff I've got highlighted in blue is what was just put in here. All right, so back to the drawing. It's telling us to select the matching point in the group. All right, so I'm going to do, once again, an E for an end, and I'll put my cursor over their blue line. Now left click, and I want to see my cursor jump to that position, and it did. So I know I got my snap right. All right, let's zoom out so we can see this whole thing. And now I'm going to go to this northeast property corner here. I like using diagonals for this stuff. It just seems to work better when you use diagonals. All right, so here here's the northeast corner in here. The green property line. Here's their blue property line, so their northeast corner is in there. All right, so the status bar is telling us select the second survey point with those same options. So once again, I'm going to do an E for end, and then I'm going to get on this property line closer to the south end than the north end, left click it, and I can see it jump to that point. So we know we got our snap. We do the same thing on their line. Watch it jump to that. Oh, and things changed. We'll go ahead and regenerate the drawing. And okay, that's looking, right off the bat, that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's take a look around. We'll scroll down. Yeah, looks good. Now there's some, yeah, looks good. They've got the highway in there. Looks like everything now is referenced properly to our existing data. So as I said before, you can use this method. Doesn't matter if it came in inches rather than feet, this will handle that. So now what else can we do with this? This XReference is in here. We've got it matched up to our data. Now keep in mind, if this underlying file changes and then the drawing gets regenerated, this will then undo that reference that I just did, because it'll go back to its previous state plus whatever changes get made to it. But that's, you know, that's not the typical case. It's just something that can happen. And notice over here, we've got an entire report on what happened. All right. So what can we do with this? If I right click on this XReference, I can go up to XReferences, and one of my options is to bind it. Those of you who haven't used CAD probably don't know what this is. Those of you who have used traditional CAD, you probably already know. But what this does is it takes this XReference, it breaks the link to the original file, takes all of these objects and writes them into our drawing file. So at that point, it would be just as if I had imported the CAD file and have all of these objects in here. Be aware that it is no longer live with the original file. So if changes come along, you'll have to bring in those changes. I can also bind it into a group, which this is a good idea. I could do this before I did the rotate, and then I could reference that group to my survey data and then work with the group. Another option here is to unload the XReference. If I unload it, what happens is, yes, I do want to unload it. It disappears from our drawing, but this is not the same as deleting that XReference. The XReference is still in our file. It's stored in our file. It's just, we basically turned it off. If we go to the Drawing Data Manager, you can see in a section here for XReferences, if we expand this, here's our XReference. So if I want to bring that back in, basically I've just gotten it out of my way for the moment. I can come here, right-click it, go to XRefs, and reload it. Yes. And it's back in. Now see, it has gone back to its original state at this point. It has gone back and reloaded from the original file. So you do have to keep that in mind. XReferences are live. In most cases, you won't be dealing with situations like this, but you do need to be aware of it. Now let's take a look at the layers. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way. So if we go to the layers in our drawing view, and I know in Traverse PC, most of us don't do anything with layers. But if I go into layers, I see my normal Traverse PC layers. I don't see anything about the XReference. But down here at the bottom, we have several different options. And one of those options is to display the XReference layers. So when I turn this on, here are these various layers that are in the XReference. And let's go ahead and display a count. Let's see how many objects are on each layer. And you see this is typical with files from traditional CAD because their templates have all these built-in layers, so that we have a ton of different layers with nothing on them. So we've got an option here, ignore layers with 0 count. So we can just get to the layers that we want to deal with. So these are the layers that are in this XReference. And if we choose to, we could come in here and select various layers and turn them off, turn them on, things like that, so that we can see just what we want to see within this XReference. Okay, so we can work with these XReference layers even while this is an XReference, and we could convert a specific layer to survey if we chose to. Another thing that we can do here is in the Drawing Data Manager, if we expand this XReference, we'll see, whoops, I'm sorry, let's go to Layers and expand XReference in layers. Here are all these layers again. And one of our options here is we can select any layer and we can delineate it in the drawing. All right, so we can see the center line layer has been highlighted here. All right, so you can use this to identify what objects are on what layers. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off now. And we'll go ahead and move on to importing. Let's take a look at importing a drawing. And this is a method that we've been using for a very, very long time. It's still extremely valuable to you. You will be using this method As I said at the beginning, we've got 3 different methods. You're going to choose what works best for you in your particular situation. So this is the second method we're going to look at. All right, so I want to import the DWG file that the engineers have sent us. So I will go to Tools, Import Data into Drawing, as opposed to Export Drawing. Gives me a chance to save it. I'm going to say no. And then I can choose what kind of file they've sent me. In this case, AutoCAD DWG. Once again, this is now the settings for importing an AutoCAD DWG. I'll tell you that these are my typical settings for importing a DWG file from someone. Just all of the right-hand ones on, all of the left-hand ones off. Sometimes I'll change it depending on what my results are. So I've got this set the way I want. Now I'll browse for the file that I want to import. And I'm importing the same file that we took a look at in the XRef. Go ahead and import it. Traverse PC says it's done it. We go ahead and close this, and lo and behold, it looks just like it did when it was an XReference. All right. Now what's different is that if I hover over anything, I'm hovering over an individual object. Okay, so right now, if I accidentally move something, I can mess this up. So what we want to do here, we have an option. If I right click on on some of that imported, one of the imported objects, go to groups and blocks, I can group the last import so that I'm working with the entire imported DWG file. I'll go ahead and do this, and now when I hover over this, I have all of the advantages of working with a group. So I can still access individual objects in the group and modify individual objects in the group, but I can work with this as an entire group. And one of those things that I can do, just like I did with the XReference, I can come up now to groups and blocks, and I can reference the group to the survey. I'm not going to take as much time with this, but I'm going to do the same thing. Watch the status bar, select the first survey point. I'm going to do exactly what I did with the XReference. E for end, pick my line, E for end. Make sure I'm on the right line, pick that. Zoom out, zoom in. Whoops, got lost. I clicked too fast. I didn't wait for it. There we go. E for end, get on this line, got that. E for end, get on this line, got that. And you can see it's popped into position exactly the way the XReference did. So same tool that we used with the XReference. The difference is that what we're seeing here is not live with that original file. This is imported data. All of these objects have been written into this drawing. So we can work with all of those individual objects. We can do things like, now this is, we don't have all the tools in the XReference that we have in here. What I'll do at this point is I'll go to groups and blocks, and I'm going to ungroup this. Okay, so now maybe I'll go in and I'm going to turn off this striping layer. Get that out of the way. Okay, now I've got some stuff that I can deal with more easily. So I could do things like, okay, so I need to go stake out some of this curbing. So zoom in on what I need. I can go ahead and select, okay, this RV dump station. I want to stake out this curb. So I'm going to select this polyline. Did I get it? Yes, I did. All right, so now I'll go ahead, right click this, and convert to survey, call it whatever this is. This is going to be the RV dump station. Choose what traverse format I want, choose how I want it displayed. If I'm displaying it in a drawing, say OK. And so now I've created this new RV dump station traverse. I could now, if I need to do offsets for my staking, I could go to COGO and do my corner offsets and whatever distance I want to put my staking from the points here. You know, let's set this to a 3-foot corner offset or staking offset. Let's go ahead and give these points a description of staking offset. And I'll go ahead and hit compute and close. And now if we go back to our traverse and tag it, we now have those offset points, so we could send this out to our data collector. We could go stake this, whatever we need to do. So once again, we have all of the same options available to us as we did with the XReference. You know, we can go to the drawing data manager. We can let's make sure this is up to date. We can delineate the various layers, or you know, all of our different options that we had with the XReference. The difference here is that we now have individual objects that we can work with in Traverse PC and that are not tied to that original XReference. All right, so our last method of the three. So we've looked at XReferences, we've looked at importing the data, and now we are going to look at sending and receiving between the CAD view and the drawing view. All right, so this is a little bit different method than either of the ones we've seen, but you're going to see that we're going to have the same options available to us. I'm going to open that same file, so we're not going to be working with anything different. Here's that file again. And we already know that the basis of bearing is different. All right. Now, what I can do here, I could go into my layers, and I could start by turning off some layers that I don't want. Let's see, there's a striping layer I don't want. There, let's get that out of the way. So I could sit here and turn off. Well, maybe that was not the one I wanted. Let's ignore layers with 0 count, make sure I'm not. Let's turn off Highway 101. We don't need that. And we don't need labels. That must be it. So I can come in here and simplify this a bit, get it down to what I really want to be working with. All right, so now I've got this simplified. I could then go in and let's zoom in a little bit. All right, so here's my property line. Now I definitely want this because I need something to be able to match up to my existing data. All right, so I definitely want this property line. So I'm just going to go ahead and select this property line, and then I'm going to right click and go to drawing view, and I want to send the selected entities layers as group. So maybe before I do this, let's get out of that. Well, you know, I need the building corners, so let's go ahead and, oh, here's curbing. Let's grab that curbing, and let's grab the building corners. So now I'm getting the curbing, the building, and the property line, and that's really should give me just about everything I need just to be on the safe side. Let's grab this. So assuming that on their end they have put this stuff in appropriate layers, Let's just grab one of these, just to make darn sure. I've selected all these objects. So now I will go to Drawing View, Send Selected Entities Layers as Groups. So that's going to give me everything that's on those layers. I'll go ahead and do that, and I can see now that all of that stuff, those layers have come over, and yeah, it looks like I've got everything I need to go stake out in the field. Let me go back to drawing data. Let's refresh this, because there we go. Okay, so as a group, these objects are all on one layer. And we want that as a group right now. I'm not sure why that delineation is staying stuck turned on today. But the way this will work, once again, it's the same thing we saw with the imported data. This is a group, so I can come in here and right-click any member of the group, go to Groups and Blocks, reference the group to the survey just the way I did before. Okay, so I'm going to zip through this. E for end, grab that guy. E for end, grab that guy. Zoom out, zoom in. Notice that this is much simpler than what I was dealing with when I imported the entire file. Okay, so I can just see the stuff that I want to work with, and there I've got all that. Now at this point, I would take it and I would ungroup it so that I can, let's regenerate now. There we go. So now I could come in here and say, oh yeah, okay, so there's all my curbing that I need to stake out. So I could just right click on any of this curbing, go down to layer tools, and convert all objects to survey. So this is all my curbing. I'll say convert all objects to survey. Now it's telling me that there's over 100 objects here. That's okay. We want to go ahead and say yes. And we'll say curbing. And choose our traverse format and settings if we're going to display it on a drawing. And we can fill in a description if we want. All right. Curbing from DWG. Say okay. And now we have this new traverse that has 778 points, but we've got all of those curbing points now in here. So we can do whatever we need to go out and stake this out in the field. We can do the same thing going the other direction. So one of the things that I could do, if I chose to, I could go into my surface here and say, turn on the tin. Then I could right click on a tin line and I could go to, I'm sorry, just lost my place here. Go to CAD view and send that object. All right. So I've just sent that one tin line, or I could send, you know, there are various things that I can send to the CAD view. I could select, do a cross, selected that batch of objects, I could send all of those to the CAD view. So now I've got those objects in the CAD view, and I could do whatever I want to do there. Now keep in mind, those aren't matched up because of that basis of bearing issue. Those are the three methods for working with data from a traditional CAD program. You can see you're going to use the different methods in different situations depending on what you need to do and what you're comfortable working with, to be quite honest. You know, what's going to work best for you? Do you want to bring in an XReference and then bind it? Do you want to import the entire file and then work with it in the drawing view? Or do you want to send stuff back and forth with the CAD view? Totally up to you. It's your choice how you work with this. Let's take a look at exporting this stuff for Stakeout. How are we going to take all of this stuff that we brought in and send it out to stake it out in the field? And we're going to start by looking at creating Stakeout notes. I know most of you don't create Stakeout notes, but some of you probably do, because I get that question every now and then. So let's take a look. I've already sent some stuff over here, so I'm getting a pretty fair number of traverses here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on traverse groups. If you're not familiar with this, we can turn on traverse groups. We can group various things, all right, so that we can work with whatever we want to work with. You know, do I want to be looking at my field data? Well, yeah, actually I do. I've got curbing and this dump station. You know, I'm going to select those and I want to move those into my Stakeout group. So traverse groups, I want to move, actually, I believe, let's expand this. I can take this up and I believe I can just drag them into Stakeout. Yeah, no, yes, I got curbing. Okay, let's get the other one. Actually, I don't need it because it's part of curbing, but okay, so I've got these traverses I've created for Stakeout. The way this works, let's just work with this RV dump station. So my goal is to create Stakeout notes so I can look at my sheet of paper and go stake this out. And keep in mind, I have done my corner offsets on this. So I've got my points here. Well, what I can do is I can open this traverse, format it however I need, whatever I need in my Stakeout notes, all right, whether we're dealing with horizontal distance or slope distance, whatever we want to use. So we'll come in here, we'll come to the top of it, and we'll insert a new point. And what we're going to do here is we're going to recall the point that we want to set up on to stake this out. So I'll recall point B4. Now I want to recall a backside point, so I'll insert a new point. We'll use B6 as our backside. Change this to a backside. I'll do that by doing a Shift F10. If you're not familiar with the hotkey for that, change that to a backside. Now I want to change all of these points to side shots. So I'll select all those, do F10 for side shot. I now have staking notes for all of these points, and notice my staking offset points say that in them. Okay, now what if I can't be sure that I can get to all of those points from B4, or there's they've got some heavy equipment parked on top of B4, whatever. I need an alternative point to stake these out from. So the way I do that, now that I've got this traverse set up, I'm in good shape to go back to the traverses and take that traverse that I've just worked with. Let's take a look at it. So you can see the side shots out there from B4. All right, well, I can take this traverse and copy this traverse. All right, so now I'm going to have an identical traverse, and I could open this traverse and I can change the name if I want. It's going to all be set up, but now I want to use B6 as my occupied and B4 as my backside. So I just type in B6, recall it, come down, recall B4 as my backside, whoops, capital, All right, so now I have an alternate setup where I can stake those points from. So this is how I would create my stakeout notes. So I could then print out each of those traverses, take them with me, and work from my stakeout notes. Next thing that most of you will be doing, and that is you're typically going to be exporting the points to your data collector to go out in the field and stake them out. The way this works, we go to File, Export, where it gives us a chance to save the file. I'm going to say no. And then normally the very first thing we'd look at is what are we exporting? Well, I'm going to move on to what kind of file we're going to do first. So typically you're probably just going to send an ASCII coordinate list. You may want to send some other type of file. Maybe you want to send a TDS raw file, RW5 file, whatever. Typically, I would say for stakeout, you're probably just going to send an ASCII coordinate list. Okay, and that's what we'll look at here. Once again, this gear icon, it's settings. So right now it's the ASCII export settings. Now, by default, Traverse PC comes to you with the format set to what has become the de facto industry standard over many years. That's point, comma, northing, comma, easting, comma, elevation, comma, description with each point on its own line in the file. This is simply an ASCII text file. That's all ASCII means is text. Now, what has changed over the years is what extension is used. It used to be ASC got used a lot. Now we're seeing a lot of data collectors use a TXT, or they call it a CSV. Don't get confused by that CSV name. A CSV file, all it is a comma delimited text file. It's an ASCII file. So down here, whatever your data collector is expecting, you can set this extension so the Traverse PC will automatically create the extension that your data collector wants to see. All right. We'll go ahead and OK this. The next thing is, what are we going to export? In this case, Traverse PC is showing right now, it doesn't know what we want to export, so it automatically says, okay, they want the entire survey. Well, no, we don't. We don't want the entire survey. So I pulled down my list of options. I could do the 4 tagged items in the Traverses Manager, or I could do this one entire traverse. Well, none of those options are exactly what I want. So I could go over now to the Traverses Manager. Let's move this over to the side. I moved that farther than I wanted to. And I could select what I want. So I want all of these stakeout traverses. Notice when I did this, this has automatically updated to the 6 selected items in the Traverses Manager. So I can pick this and I can go ahead and export those to an ASCII coordinate list. Well, maybe that's not what I want. Maybe I want just those points that are labeled as stakeout, right, from the staking offset points I created. Yeah, I just want these points. So I come to the points manager, I clicked on the description header to sort by description. That put them alphabetically by description. Then I clicked it again to do reverse alphabetic, select the staking offset points, and now my what list says, oh yeah, that's what you want. So I could go ahead, set my file name. If my data collector is set up, maybe my data collector is hooked up to my computer right now via USB. I could click here and browse and just browse out to my data collector and simply write this file straight to my data collector. Or I've got an old HP 48 running TDS. There are a lot of them. They're a workhorse. Well, it's hooked up via serial connector to my computer. I could come down here and export directly to my data collector via serial if I want. I'm just going to export this file. Yes. And so we wrote our 12 points. If I hit preview, it's going to open that. in my notepad so I can take a look and see, okay, I got point numbers, northing, easting, elevation, and description, just like I expect to see. And so now I've got that to my data collector. I can go out into the field and stake out those points however I want to do it. We can also, for those folks that need it, we can also do land XML files. If you need to send stuff over to, if you need to send stuff or receive stuff from Civil 3D, land XML works great for that. The traverses and everything is well supported. Land XML, you know, it's just proof once again the original concept of working with traverses the way we do. It's just such a solid concept that we get reminded of that every time we look at new things that come out from other people. Traverses just fall right in there.